Hey guys, tonight we travel far south, past the fertile bends of Egypt's Nile and into the lands where the sun hits a little harder. The winds dry your throat faster, and the sand seems to sneak into everything. Welcome to Ancient Nubia, home to the mighty kingdom of Kush, where gold glitters in the cliffs and history waits beneath your tired feet. Now, I should warn you, this is not a vacation. You're about to spend a day walking in the sandals of a Nubian local, and let's just say, you probably won't survive this. Between the relentless heat, the labour and the unfamiliar culture, it's a miracle anyone makes it to sundown in one piece. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it in your part of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink up at the sky, already regretting waking up. The sun is barely above the horizon, and yet it's hot. Not the polite warmth of a spring morning, but the kind of heat that slinks into your bones and whispers, "Get ready." You're standing at the edge of a dusty village, a few sun-baked homes made from mud brick, their corners crumbling slightly, yet still standing after decades of desert wind. Welcome to Nubia, sometime around 700 BCE. Your mouth is already dry, and the cloth wrap around your head is damp with sweat. You thought the desert might be dry. Turns out it's humid and dry. A rare, unfair combination. The locals call it normal. You call it mildly apocalyptic. Out here, survival is a full-time job. No one's lounging in the shade sipping fermented date juice, although that does sound amazing. Instead, the day begins with hauling water, always water. You grip a sun-warmed clay jug, glance toward the shimmering Nile and sigh. It looks close, but it's a deceptive dance. Mirages and the heat haze make every step feel like 3. You trudge forward, your feet sinking just slightly into the sand, and realize your sandals are a terrible fit. The leather thongs are too tight, the soles too thin. Your pinky toe is definitely plotting its escape. Along the way, a group of Nubian children runs past you, laughing. They're not even sweating. One of them points to your ridiculous attempt at balancing the jug and says something that sounds suspiciously like, "Baby giraffe." Great. You've become the village entertainment. Again. You reach the riverbank and see locals already at work, washing, filling jars, fishing with nets strung between reeds. The Nile is life here. It flows like an artery through this sun-blasted land, nurturing crops, transporting goods, and occasionally harbouring crocodiles the size of small boats. One man nods toward a slow-moving shadow beneath the surface and mutters something about the old one. You pretend you didn't hear that. The water is cool and you're tempted to dunk your entire head in, but instead you focus on the task. Fill the jar. Don't spill it. Don't drop it. Don't think about what's watching from under the reeds. You manage to fill your jug and start the trek back, arms trembling from the weight. As you pass a group of elders sitting in the meagre shade of a palm frond awning, they give you nods of approval. Or maybe pity. It's hard to tell. One of them gestures for you to come closer and hands you a piece of flatbread. It's dry, hard, and tastes a bit like old sandals. But you're grateful. As you chew, you try to remember your history lessons. The kingdom of Kush was once powerful enough to rule over Egypt. Their kings, called Kor, built pyramids, worshipped gods with lion heads and sun discs, and controlled trade routes that stretched all the way to sub-Saharan Africa. But none of that feels relevant when you're sweating through every pore and trying not to drop your water. Still, the legacy is all around you. Every hill seems to whisper secrets, every ruin hints at glory. And scholars still debate whether the Kushites borrowed their royal customs from Egypt, or whether the influence flowed the other way. Either way, their civilization was no minor footnote. It was a force to be reckoned with, chiseled into stone and buried beneath sand. A sudden gust of wind kicks up dust and stings your eyes. You curse softly and trip over a loose rock. Your jug wobbles dangerously but somehow doesn't spill. You keep walking, determined to at least finish this one errand without humiliating yourself again. Back at the village, you deposit the water near the communal fire pit and collapse onto a woven mat. Your arms feel like boiled noodles. A woman walks by carrying 2 jugs on her shoulders and doesn't even glance your way. You're clearly not impressing anyone here. An old man sits beside you, humming to himself while repairing a fishing net with fingers as gnarled as olive wood. He offers you a dried fig, and you accept it gratefully. It's sweet and chewy, and for a moment things feel almost okay. Then the sun rises higher, and the heat triples. You're not sure what time it is. Time in Nubia seems to run on sweat. Everything slows down. People move deliberately, efficiently, like they've done this since birth. You, on the other hand, are a melting modern popsicle with no idea how to survive another hour. But there's no escaping it. This is only the beginning. No naps, no air conditioning, just sand, sun, and the knowledge that you've got another 19 hours to go. You squint against the sun as it bounces off the surface of the Nile, dancing in a way that would be beautiful if you weren't already drenched in sweat and on the verge of heat stroke. Somewhere behind you, a rooster crows late and lazily, which feels like an insult. You've been up for hours already, and now it's time for round 2 of your Nubian crash course, the river. You shuffle toward the shore again, your shoulders still sore from the earlier water run. This time, though, you're not hauling jugs. You're going to learn how to survive on the banks of the Nile, swim, bathe, maybe even fish if you're lucky. But nothing here is as easy as it sounds, especially when you're sharing space with toothy ancient reptiles that consider humans a chewy snack. The river is shimmering and wide, its waters muddy near the edge but deeper and clearer just beyond. Locals are already knee-deep, washing clothes or splashing their faces. A few are out on slender reed boats, paddling gracefully, which you find very unfair. You, on the other hand, almost trip over a submerged root before even getting your feet wet. You wade in cautiously. The water is cool, blessedly so, and for a moment you close your eyes and let it wash over your legs. Relief. Actual, tangible relief. That is, until someone behind you mutters a word you've heard before. Temet. It's the local term for big croc. You freeze. Suddenly every ripple, every swirl of water feels like an omen. And yes, there they are. 2 eyes, just above the surface, not too far away. The crocodile doesn't move, just stares at you like it's sizing you up. You step back slowly, hoping it has somewhere else to be today. Nubians have lived alongside these beasts for millennia. To them, it's just another neighbour, grumpy, ancient, and best left alone. Some even believe crocodiles are sacred, tied to the god Sobek, who was worshipped in both Egypt and parts of Nubia. Offerings were made to keep the beasts at bay, and some temples even housed tame crocodiles, which sounds cute until you realise they're only tame if they've just been fed. Experts still debate whether Nubians fully adopted the Egyptian cult of Sobek, or whether they integrated him into their own rich pantheon of deities. Either way, crocodiles earned a mixture of fear and reverence that's still palpable in the way villagers glance at the water. You slosh back to shore, a little humbler, a little wetter, and trying not to look like you were about to cry. A young boy laughs as he sees your expression. He tosses you a net. Clearly it's your turn to help with fishing. The net is handmade, knotted together with care and heavier than it looks. You haul it toward a shallow pool and follow the other's lead, spreading it across the water and hoping for something more edible than a water snake. The technique is deceptively simple. Hold the edges, walk slowly, and wait. Unfortunately, you forget to wait and yank too soon. Nothing. Just weeds and a lot of splashing. One of the older women sighs audibly. You're demoted to basket duty. You sit on a log and hold the woven fish basket while others do the hard work. Every now and then, someone tosses a wriggling fish in your direction. You try to catch them without getting slapped in the face by a tail, and you fail at least twice. Still, you learn something valuable here. The Nile isn't just a river. It's a lifeline. It's where people bathe, fish, wash, gather, worship, flirt, and even tell stories. You overhear one about a spirit that lives in the reeds. A tall, silent woman with hair made of black snakes. She only appears at dusk, one girl says in a sing-song whisper, and she steals your voice. You pretend not to be creeped out. One man, the unofficial village historian, sits near you and begins carving something into a flat piece of wood. He tells you about the ancient Kushite cities like Kerma and Napata, powerful, bustling centres where temples rose from stone and nobles walked in gold-threaded linen. He mentions a time when the Kushite kings ruled both Nubia and Egypt, sitting on pharaohs' thrones and building pyramids, smaller than Giza's, but still noble in stature. You nod politely, though you're mostly focused on a suspicious ripple in the water about 5 feet away. As the sun rises higher, the fishes wrap up. The morning catch is decent, enough to dry, salt and store for the week. A small victory in a world where refrigeration doesn't exist, and dinner can depend entirely on the angle of your net. You help carry the basket back, trying not to groan too audibly under its weight. Your arms feel like they belong to someone else. Before heading back, you're handed a flat stone with a small piece of soap-like clay. Time to bathe. You eye the water again. The crocodile is gone, or at least invisible. You step in cautiously, lather up with the gritty, herbal-smelling clay, and scrub like you're trying to erase your whole past life. Around you, people splash and chatter, the atmosphere suddenly more relaxed. It's a communal experience, this riverside routine, a ritual of both cleanliness and connection. Of course, just as you're starting to enjoy the cool water and the sounds of conversation, a kid nearby flings a handful of silt at you. You retaliate, and for a few blissful seconds you're part of a mud-slinging, laughing mess of humanity. Until someone yells something about the tail and everyone scrambles to shore again. You never see the tail, but you don't ask questions either. Soaking wet and covered in fine river sand, you shuffle back to the village once more. It's barely mid-morning. You feel like you've already lived a full week. And you know what? The worst part isn't the heat, the crocs, or the sore muscles. It's that you've still got fish slime between your fingers and no idea where to wipe it. You've barely dried off when you're ushered toward a shady patch behind one of the clay homes. A few people are squatting there around a fire pit, tending to something bubbling in a clay pot. Your stomach growls, a growl so loud a nearby goat gives you a side-eye. Breakfast time in Nubia. Finally. You lower yourself onto a woven reed mat with the grace of a soggy towel. The smells wafting from the pot are hard to place. Earthy, slightly sour. There's a hint of something toasted like burnt grain, and something else, like boiled grass with ambition. An elder woman hands you a bowl carved from a gourd. Inside, a sludgy porridge made from sorghum. It's thick, greyish and steaming. You stir it around with a carved wooden spoon, praying for a hidden chunk of the honey or fruit. No such luck. You raise the spoon to your lips and take a cautious bite. It's, okay, a little tangy, like someone left the oatmeal out in the sun too long, then decided to bring it back inside and call it rustic. But it's warm, filling, and surprisingly energizing. You look around at your fellow breakfasters. They eat with the same rhythm as their work, methodical, unhurried. You try to match their pace, even though the porridge is sticking to your teeth like wet sand. Someone drops a dried locust into their bowl and crunches it like a crouton. You pretend not to see it. Here, breakfast isn't just about calories, it's tradition. Sorghum is a staple crop in Nubia, as it has been for thousands of years. It's hardy, thrives in the heat, and can be used in everything from porridge to beer. Some families even ferment it slightly, adding a mild tang that doubles as morning coffee, but with less caffeine and more surprise texture. You're offered a second bowl, this time of kisra, a thin, crepe-like bread made from fermented sorghum flour. It's soft, spongy, and slightly sour, perfect for scooping up lentil paste or bits of dried fish. You eat it with your hands, which feels strangely satisfying until you remember you still have a layer of Nile mud under your fingernails. And just when you're getting comfortable, someone offers you a treat, a chunk of fermented goat cheese wrapped in leaves. You smile politely and accept it. Big mistake. The smell hits first, sharp, funky, like the goat never left. Then the texture, crumbly but moist. You chew with a smile frozen on your face, nodding like, yes, ancient dairy. But inside, full rebellion. Still, there's something charming about this shared meal. The quiet chewing, the low hum of conversation, the occasional chuckle when a child tips over a bowl. Meals in Nubia aren't rushed. They're social glue. You're not just feeding your body, you're taking your place in the rhythm of the day. You sip from a communal jar of lightly fermented date drink. It's sour, fizzy, and slightly alcoholic. Not enough to get you tipsy, but enough to feel a tickle in your nose. You wonder aloud if this counts as hydrating. The old man beside you grins and says something that probably means, only if you drink 3 jugs. You glance toward the fire, where a woman is stirring a small pot of crushed hibiscus and wild herbs. This is karkadeh, a tart, deep red tea that cools the blood and lifts the spirits. You're offered a sip. is like drinking a flower that's had a rough day, tart, sweet and bitter all at once. The Nubians take pride in making the most of their environment. Their meals are simple but resourceful, utilising what the desert gives, what the Nile nourishes. Nothing's wasted. Even fish heads are simmered into broths that heal sore joints and empty bellies. Scholars remain divided on how much Egyptian influence shaped Nubian cuisine, or if the Nubians were the real innovators in certain dishes. Either way, what ends up in your bowl isn't just survival food, it's heritage. A woman nearby begins to sing as she washes gourds. The melody is soft and repetitive, almost hypnotic. It tells a story of a rainless season and the return of the ibis bird. You don't understand the words, but you feel the rhythm settle into your bones. Others start to hum along. Even the children, usually so wiggly, go quiet. You exhale slowly, leaning back. Maybe, just maybe, you could get used to this. The food isn't your favourite, but the atmosphere. It feels like home without walls. Then a chicken hops onto your lap and poops on your kisra. You hand what's left to a laughing boy and stand up slowly, hoping the breakfast part of your day is officially over. Your stomach is full, your breath smells like goat cheese and hibiscus, and your fingers are sticky with fermented grain. But the village is already stirring again. Pots are being rinsed, mats rolled up, and a woman gestures to you with a basket of millet. Apparently it's time to help with grinding. Of course it is. You sigh, wipe your hands on your tunic, which doesn't help, and follow. One more meal down. 19 hours to go. You're starting to realise that in ancient Nubia, the concept of rest is more myth than reality. No sooner have you finished breakfast, still savouring that faint aftertaste of goat cheese and regret, than you're ushered toward the communal grinding area. It's a simple space, a patch of packed earth where several women squat beside wide, shallow stone basins, each paired with a long, cylindrical grinding stone. The scent of raw millet and dry dust fills your nose as you drop to your knees beside them, instantly regretting every past moment you ever complained about doing dishes. Your task is straightforward in theory. Take a handful of millet, pour it into the stone basin, then crush it rhythmically with the roller, over and over and over. You grip the stone with both hands, push forward, pull back, push forward, pull back. The grain crunches beneath the weight, creating a soft, steady rasp, like sandpaper against sandpaper. 5 minutes in, your arms are already burning. 10 minutes in, your palms are rubbed pink. 15 minutes in, and you're fairly sure you've time-travelled into an ancient CrossFit class. The women beside you move effortlessly. Their strokes are smooth, measured, and almost meditative. They laugh, gossip, hum. One of them glances at your red face and offers a sympathetic smile, or maybe it's pity. Hard to tell through the sweat cloud. Grinding grain isn't just a chore, it's an essential rhythm of the day, an act passed down through generations. In Nubia, where bread and porridge form the base of nearly every meal, this task is as crucial as it is repetitive. And unlike you, they're doing this before and after the full heat of the day sets in. You shift your weight and try again, this time following their pace. It's almost like a drumbeat, push, pull, push, pull. The dust rises around you, and for a moment the world narrows down to sound and sweat and grit. Then your grinding stone slips and crushes your thumbnail. You yelp. Everyone looks. A goat bleats mockingly. You wave off the sympathy, pretend you're fine, and secretly vow to never complain about modern blenders again. As you're nursing your poor thumb and brushing millet dust off your knees, a young man walks by carrying a large clay jug on his shoulder. He nods toward the river. You're back on water duty. Again. This time, you try a shortcut through a narrower path between houses and nearly step on a sleeping dog. It doesn't move. You stop and check, still breathing. Just wisely ignoring the entire human race. By now, the sun is no longer gently rising. It's glaring. It sits in the sky like a hot coin, pressing down on everything. The wind, if it comes at all, is dry and taunting. Your tunic clings to your back like a second, much grumpier skin. The Nile shimmers ahead. This time, you take a smaller jug, learning your lesson from round 1, and manage to fill it with only a minor splash. You let your fingers trail in the water for a second too long. It's soothing, yes, but you've also seen what lurks below. You jerk your hand back out, convinced something brushed your toe. As you return to the village, you notice a gathering near the central clearing. A few older men and women are crouched in a circle around something. A set of carved stones, possibly used for counting grain rations or tracking trade. One man speaks slowly and deliberately, tapping each stone like a teacher. You get closer, curious. Turns out you're watching a form of communal bookkeeping. While not as advanced as the scribble class of Egypt, Nubians had their own methods of tallying, using pebbles, etched wood, or knotted cords. These records help track livestock, grain harvests, or taxes due to the local temple. Scholars still debate whether this form of proto-accounting originated independently in Nubia, or was adopted and adapted from Egyptian administrative systems. What's clear, though, is that even in a modest village, every grain counted, and someone was always counting. A child offers you a dried date as you observe. It's tough, chewy, and sweet. You thank him and sit on a nearby rock, watching the rhythm of village life continue. Grinding stones, water jars, quiet conversation, the occasional chicken-related chaos. Then a woman gestures to you again, this time pointing toward the edge of the village, where two people are carrying bundles of firewood. You've been recruited, again. The Nubian day is a relay, and you're the new guy who keeps getting handed the baton. You pick up a small bundle. Okay, let's be honest, it's still massive, and hoist it onto your back. The twigs scratch your shoulders, the cord bites into your palms. You trudge back slowly, leaving a breadcrumb trail of sweat droplets. Halfway to the cooking area, a sudden gust sends dust into your mouth. You choke, stumble, and drop half the bundle. As you scramble to restack it, you notice a black beetle the size of your thumb climbing onto your sandal. You let out a squeak, flick it off, and try to pretend you're still tough. Finally, you drop the wood near the fire circle and collapse onto a mat. A breeze finally arrives. It feels like a miracle. A woman nearby hands you a small cup of tamarind water. It's tangy, cold, and astonishingly delicious. You sip slowly, letting the flavour soak into your parched soul. Above you, vultures circle in lazy arcs. Not ominous, just practical. In this land, everything plays its part, even the scavengers. As the midday sun climbs higher, the village begins to quiet. It's rest time for some, but you know your break will be short-lived. Still, for these few minutes, you lean back against a clay wall, arms scratched, back sore, stomach slightly fuller than before, and wonder if you're starting to adapt. Then you shift and get a splinter from the reed mat. Of course you do. You're beginning to suspect that every part of ancient Nubia was designed specifically to make you uncomfortable. As the sun tilts toward its cruel zenith, someone hands you what appears to be a bundle of cloth. It's light, vaguely fragrant, and surprise, meant for you. It's time to change into proper local attire. You look down at your already sweat-stained tunic and nod. Anything has to be better than walking around in a sack that smells like boiled porridge. You step behind a half-wall near a storage hut and examine the garments. They're linen, coarse, but breathable. A sleeveless tunic, wrapped skirt, and a sash to tie it all together. It looks simple enough, and yet, somehow, within 2 minutes, you've accidentally knotted the sash into something resembling a noose, and the skirt is either too low or threatening to become a crop top. Eventually, with a bit of help, and a lot of side-eye from a passing child, you manage to secure the outfit. It's surprisingly elegant once it's on properly. The linen moves with the wind and reflects a bit of the sun. You feel slightly less doomed. Nubians were known for their distinct and beautiful clothing. While the elite often wore elaborately dyed fabrics and fine jewellery, everyday attire was much more functional. Tunics, kilts and shawls were the standard. And yes, barefoot was normal. But for someone like you, the local sand feels like a skillet set to sauté. You try to walk with confidence, but each step is a micro-battle between your soles and the angry ground. A woman nearby chuckles and hands you leather foot wraps tied with thin cords. Relief, finally. You bow dramatically in gratitude. She rolls her eyes and waves you off. Next comes the adornment. You're handed a necklace of beads strung on twisted fibre, earthy reds and browns, likely made from clay and carnelian. It's beautiful, a little heavy, and entirely unexpected. Nubians adored personal ornamentation. Jewellery wasn't just for show, it symbolised status, heritage, sometimes even protection from illness or misfortune. One of the elders beckons you over. She's seated beneath a hanging cloth awning, working on what looks like cosmetics. You tilt your head. That can't be right. But yes, She's grinding green malachite into powder, mixing it with fat to form a creamy eye paint. She gestures, and before you can protest, she's smearing it just beneath your eyes. You blink, surprised by the cooling effect. This isn't vanity. The green pigment helps reflect sunlight and ward off infections, an ancient trick with scientific merit. In fact, experts still debate whether the Nubians pioneered this method independently or adopted it via contact with Egyptians. Either way, you're now sun-protected and stylish. Then comes the body oil, a mixture of animal fat, crushed herbs, and possibly frankincense. It's rubbed into your arms and chest with surprising care. The scent is strong, earthy, smoky, not unpleasant. You're told it softens the skin, keeps insects away, and offers spiritual protection. Which sounds great, but you mostly just feel like a well-seasoned roast chicken. And then comes the hair treatment. Your scalp is unceremoniously doused with palm oil and massaged until you nearly fall asleep sitting up. You're handed a comb made of carved wood and gently told to fix whatever is happening on top of your head. You try. It doesn't help. Hairstyles in Nubia were diverse. Braids, twists, shaved styles, and sometimes wigs. Elite men and women often adorn their hair with golden rings or ivory pins. You, however, are given a strip of cloth to tie it back. It's functional. It also makes you look like you lost a fight with a laundry line. A girl with intricate braids points to your reflection in a polished bronze shard. You study yourself. Linen tunic, beaded necklace, gleaming skin, slight eye paint, and a dazed expression. You're starting to look like a real local, or at least someone who might survive until dinner. Just then, a boy nearby starts laughing. You follow his gaze and realise your newly oiled chest has collected a thick layer of sand from leaning against the wall. You're a walking sugar scrub. Great. Someone hands you a simple fan made of reeds. You wave it half-heartedly. It helps. A little. You sit beneath a tree and take a moment. The breeze shifts, and for the first time all day, it doesn't feel like a punishment. Your clothing breathes. Your feet aren't screaming. Your skin smells like ancient incense. You're not entirely miserable. A few older women begin singing again. Another work song, slow and repetitive. It's soothing. A soft percussion builds with a hand drum and the tapping of beads. You sway slightly to the rhythm, half asleep, half listening. Suddenly, a question pops into your mind, one the academic in you can't resist. Did this style of dress develop entirely within Nubia, or was it shaped by trade, conquest, and migration? The jury's out on that. Some scholars argue that Nubian attire reflects long-standing indigenous patterns, while others suggest influence from Egyptian and even Levantine fashion. Regardless, it's uniquely adapted to this harsh, beautiful environment. You stretch out on the mat, hands behind your head, and gaze up at the woven palm ceiling overhead. Somewhere beyond it, the sun is still baking the land, but you're shaded, oiled, adorned, and, amazingly, not entirely miserable. Then a fly lands directly in your eye paint. Of course it does. You mutter something inappropriate, wipe your face, and get to your feet. The next phase of your Nubian day awaits. You're not sure what it is, but you're almost certain it will involve more sweating. You barely have time to adjust your sash before you're handed a clay water jug and directed toward a circle of women seated beside an enormous wooden basin. Surrounding them are stacks of pottery, jars, bowls, small oil flasks, all in various states of completion. It seems you've been volunteered for craft duty, specifically pot washing and pottery hauling. Welcome to the glamorous world of Nubian domestic chores. You lower yourself beside them, mindful of your still sore thighs. The women are already at work, scrubbing clay jars with bunches of river reeds and fibrous leaves. One of them gestures to a grimy pot beside you. You get the hint. You dunk a reed brush into water and begin scrubbing, instantly realising how stubborn dried millet porridge can be. It's like trying to remove wallpaper with a spoon. But you keep at it, and slowly the pot begins to shine in the midday light. Pottery here isn't just utilitarian, it's practically sacred. The distinctive black-topped redware of ancient Nubia is one of its most famous artefacts, fired in open pits with careful control to produce that striking two-tone finish. You're not making new pots today, but even cleaning them feels like a kind of reverence. A young woman beside you is humming a tune, her hands moving in perfect rhythm as she smooths the rim of a small jar. You try to hum along and immediately cough when a speck of clay flies into your mouth. She laughs. You spit discreetly into the sand. Every so often, someone from the group taps a pot gently, listening to the sound it makes. A clean ping means it's whole. A dull thud, likely cracked. That one goes to the reuse pile, maybe for grinding herbs, storing ashes, or being reborn as filler in mud brick walls. You help pass the clean jars to a woven basket nearby. Each one is heavy. You lift with your knees like a good modern citizen, and instantly regret that advice when your knees say no thanks, and you nearly topple backward. You save the jar. Your dignity, not so much. After what feels like a week, the basket is full. You're instructed to carry it across the village to the storage hut near the granaries. It weighs roughly the same as your deepest regrets. You stagger forward, nearly bowling over a child who appears out of nowhere. He laughs and says something that includes the word kepi, which you later learn means donkey. Charming. You reach the hut and set the basket down with a relieved grunt. Inside, the hut is dark and cool. Rows of pots line the shelves, some full of dried grains, others containing oils, spices or bundles of medicinal herbs. A man inside nods toward a tiny jar sealed with wax and wrapped in palm fibre. He points and says something reverent. You lean closer. The jar contains a dried resin, likely myrrh or frankincense. Used for rituals, medicine, even perfume. Precious stuff. He opens the jar just slightly, lets you sniff. The scent is sweet, smoky, and ancient. It smells like forgotten temples and ceremonial fires. You thank him and leave, not trusting yourself to carry anything that valuable. Outside, the midday light is brutal. You blink into it and feel your energy begin to drain again, but no rest. Not yet. You're motioned toward another shaded area where two women are pounding something in a massive mortar. You peek inside. Clay? No, it's dua, a mix of dried herbs, ashes, and perfumed oil used to coat pots for ceremonial use. You're given a stick and told to stir. Slowly, no splashing, you stir and stir and stir. A fly lands on your ear. You twitch. Stir faster. The paste thickens. Your wrist cramps. You switch hands. You're definitely earning your ancient blisters today. One of the women speaks softly, almost as if narrating the history of this simple paste. She points to the mixture, then to her chest, then to the sky. A gesture. This is for more than storage. This is for the gods. Religious practices in Nubia weren't just imported from Egypt. While many deities overlapped, Amun, Isis, Horus, the Kushites had their own sacred traditions, often blending influences from sub-Saharan Africa. Offerings weren't just placed at temples, they were integrated into daily life, baked into bread, infused into oils, etched into every jar and figurine. Experts still debate the exact nature of these household rituals. Were they personal prayers, acts of communal belief, or remnants of older tribal rites? The truth, as usual, is likely a little of each. As you finish the stirring, the sun shifts. Shadows lengthen slightly. You're directed to help with the next phase, drying. Clean jars are placed upside down on woven racks, angled to catch just the right amount of heat. Too much sun, and the pots crack. Too little, and they mildew. You squat down beside a young girl gently dabbing the rims of small vessels with oil. It's almost ceremonial. She works with quiet concentration, whispering to herself. You copy her, trying to match her precision. Your jar wobbles. You pretend it doesn't. Finally, you're allowed to rest beneath a fig tree near the centre of the village. Your hands are raw, your back is a mess of knots, and there's clay in your ears, somehow. A boy offers you a slice of dried fig. You chew slowly, grateful. A second later, he offers you a frog. A live frog. You blink. He grins and scampers off. You let the frog go before it pees in your lap. You lean back, eyes closed, feeling the breeze pass through the branches above. Somewhere, someone is beating a drum in a slow, steady rhythm. Another day, another 1,000 chores, each one rooted in centuries of tradition. You realize that you're not just doing work, you're participating in a system that's as old as the sand beneath you, a system that relied on community, patience, rhythm and resilience. It's humbling, it's exhausting, it's beautiful. And then a chicken runs by with someone's bead necklace in its beak. You sigh. Of course it does. You've had just enough of a break to convince yourself that things might be winding down when someone tosses a wooden staff at your feet. Not to you, at you. It thuds into the dust dramatically. You stare at it, then up at the tall, muscled man who just arrived, barefoot, shirtless, wearing a wrapped linen skirt and the expression of someone who hasn't smiled since the Nile last flooded favourably. He points at the staff, then at you, then gestures toward the open field on the village outskirts. You are about to become a soldier, or at least a training dummy. With groaning limbs and a strong suspicion that this is a terrible idea, you follow him. A group of young men and a few women are already assembled, standing in loose formation. They each hold staffs or training spears, carved from sun-hardened wood. A few have small bucklers made of leather stretched tight over wooden frames. One or two sport bruises that suggest this isn't just for show. The man gives a sharp whistle, and the group straightens up. You try. You manage something that looks like an exhausted flamingo. Nubia was known for its warriors, fierce archers, skilled in desert combat, and often sought as mercenaries by both Egyptian and Near Eastern rulers. The Kingdom of Kush maintained a strong martial tradition, with training often starting early. Today, you're being fast-tracked through approximately 8 years of experience in 30 minutes. Your instructor demonstrates a simple move, a forward thrust followed by a retreating sweep. It looks graceful, almost like a dance. You try it and almost take out your own knee. The instructor doesn't laugh, which somehow makes it worse. Then he calls out a command, and the group scatters into pairs. You find yourself face to face with a boy who can't be more than 14, but already has biceps that look like they've been carved by the gods of upper body strength. You assume a shaky stance. He lunges. You flinch. Your stick flies out of your hand. You both stare at it as it clatters to the ground. He raises an eyebrow and hands it back to you without saying a word. The universal look of "bless your heart" requires no translation. You give it another go. This time you manage to keep hold of your weapon, though your arms are trembling like jelly. Each strike sends shockwaves up your bones. You're sweating in places you didn't know had pores. And your left shoulder? Yeah, that's not okay. But you persist. Move after move. Thrust. Block. Step back. Step forward. Breathe. Try not to collapse. Eventually it begins to feel a little less alien. Your hands remember the weight. Your feet move a little more naturally, and then someone hits you in the ribs with the flat side of a training spear. You stagger backward, wheezing like a deflating bellows. The others laugh, not cruelly, just with the weary camaraderie of people who've all been thwacked before. You sit in the dust, gasping. The instructor nods. Good, he says, the first word he's spoken directly to you. You're unsure if it's praise or a polite way of saying, "You're not dead yet." A young woman offers you a water skin. You drink greedily, sloshing a bit down your chin. The water is lukewarm and tastes faintly of leather, but it's heaven. After a brief rest, the training resumes. This time, archery. You're handed a bow made from carved acacia wood, strung tight with animal sinew. It's light but springy. The arrows are bundled in a quiver made of hide, their tips stone or bone, fletched with stiff bird feathers. Some are stained, red ochre perhaps, decorative or maybe ritualistic. Nubian archers were legendary. Even Egyptian wall paintings depict them with respect, often labelled the fierce bowmen of the south. Some scholars believe they could hit moving targets at astonishing distances. You, however, can barely string the bow. The instructor walks you through it. You notch the arrow, you raise the bow, you draw. Your back cramps immediately. You release. The arrow flies a majestic 7 feet and sticks into the ground like a sulking child. Everyone is kind enough not to comment. You try again, and again. The 4th arrow hits a distant bush. Success. Or rather, close enough to pretend it was on purpose. The instructor nods again, possibly his version of a standing ovation. You realise somewhere between drawing and failing that this isn't just training, it's community theatre. Every villager learns basic self-defence. Every able body becomes a part of the village's safety net. Raids from rival groups, wild animals, or simply the harsh demands of hunting and herding require a constant state of readiness. Experts still debate how centralised Kushite military training was. Were these small villages sending recruits to larger garrisons, or was every community responsible for its own defence? The truth likely varied over time and region. But what's clear is that martial readiness was not optional. Your final task is the endurance run. The instructor gestures to a loop around the village, maybe half a mile. You nod. You take off, You regret everything. By the quarter mark, you're wheezing. By the halfway point, you're delirious. By the final stretch, you're convinced your legs are held together with straw and stubbornness. Children jog past you barefoot, giggling. One hands you a fig mid-stride. You eat it without chewing. You cross the finish line and collapse into a blessed patch of shade. You did it. You survived Nubian training. Barely. As you lay there, eyes closed, flies landing gently on your forehead like tiny judges, someone taps your foot. The instructor. He nods. You sit up, panting. Good? You croak. He considers. Better than last moon's visitor. You grin through the dust, and then throw up a little. Of course you do. You wake up to the not-so-gentle sensation of someone shaking your shoulder with the urgency of a person who's seen you nap one too many times. Your limbs feel like they've been replaced with damp linen sacks and your spine might have turned into a wooden paddle overnight. Still you rise, slowly, groaning like a creaky door. Turns out, you're not done training yet, because now it's time to try archery properly. Again. With more risk, fewer instructions, and possibly less sympathy. You limp toward the edge of the village where a cluster of archery targets has been set up. Rough-hewn bundles of dried grass, tied tight with palm rope, painted with crude concentric circles. Some of them even have animal shapes painted on for extra motivation, or humiliation. You're handed the same acacia wood bow from earlier, but this one has seen better days. The grip is slick from years of use. The string creaks ominously when you draw it back. You're also handed 5 arrows with chipped flint tips. One is bent. You pretend not to notice. This time, you're expected to aim at targets over 30 yards away. The other trainees line up beside you. One of them, maybe 15 years old, already has 2 bullseyes before you've even raised your bow. You draw. You breathe. You release. Your arrow arcs dramatically and lands 5 feet in front of you. Someone coughs. You're not sure if it's a laugh or pity. You try again. Second arrow, a little better. You hit the outer rim of the target. It's not a bullseye, but it's not the ground either. You allow yourself a nod. Then someone yells. You turn just in time to see a goat trotting through the training field, dragging what looks like someone's laundry behind it. A flurry of shouting ensues. The goat headbutts one of the target bundles and then disappears into a field of millet victorious. You sigh and lower your bow. Nubian combat readiness clearly includes goat evasion. As order is restored, one of the elders begins explaining the philosophy behind Nubian archery. Through a translator of sorts, an older teen who knows just enough of your language, you learn that it's not about brute force. It's about rhythm, timing, breath. Your heartbeat must slow to the pace of the wind, your body in harmony with the draw. It sounds poetic. It also sounds like something your body has no intention of doing. But still you try. This time you draw more slowly, holding your breath just before the release. The arrow soars and thuds into the second ring. Not perfect, but respectable. You glance at the elder. He gives you the most subtle of nods, barely more than a blink. Victory. Your archery interlude is interrupted when a man with calloused hands and a permanent squint gestures for you to follow him. You've been selected to assist in bronze work, because nothing says relaxing day like fire, metal, and the possibility of third-degree burns. The bronze workshop is nothing more than a shallow pit lined with stones and a small bellows system made of goat skin and wood. Nearby sits a flat slab used for hammering, several clay moulds and a basket of raw materials, mostly copper, with bits of tin and scrap bronze. A few blackened tools lie to the side, tongs, chisels, and one small hammer that looks like it could file your patience into dust. Bronze was vital in ancient Nubia. It shaped weapons, tools, ornaments, even symbols of status. While the Kushites later became masters of ironworking, bronze remained central for centuries. The casting process is delicate, too hot, and the mould cracks, too cool, and the metal solidifies before filling its form. You're asked to work the bellows first. It's not glamorous, but it's crucial. You squat beside the fire, gripping the handles of the goatskin pouch and begin pumping. In, outside, in, outside. The fire responds, glowing brighter, hotter, alive. Within minutes your arms are trembling. Again. There's a theme to this day. When the metal begins to melt, glowing like a piece of the sun, it's poured carefully into a mould. You hold your breath as it hisses and steams, then hardens slowly into the form of a blade. A small, elegant dagger. When it cools, the smith removes it with tongs, inspects it, and then hands it to you. It's heavier than you expect. Still warm, the edge dull for now, but with a beauty that feels ancient and dangerous. You place it reverently onto a wooden rack. You helped make that. Sort of. Maybe. Your reward. A short demonstration on using such a blade in close combat. The smith shows you how it's held, not with brute strength, but with agility. Parry. Deflect. Redirect. You try it with a practice blade. He immediately disarms you. Twice. Then the smith brings out a pile of scrap metal and hands you a chisel and hammer. It's time to flatten out warped arrowheads. You nod, thankful to do something you can actually manage without needing a helmet. As you tap away, the repetitive rhythm begins to lull you. There's a piece to the precision. Find the weak spot, align the chisel, strike, repeat. It almost feels modern, mechanical, like ancient meditation. The sound carries across the yard, mixing with laughter from the nearby granary. Goat bleats from the horizon, and the faint melody of a reed flute being played by someone with too much free time. Then you miss the chisel entirely and smack your thumb. Of course you do. By late afternoon you're done with weapons, at least for now. Your hands are blistered, your legs ache, and your arms have officially filed a complaint with the rest of your body. You sit near the fire pit where someone's roasting something small and unidentifiable on a stick. It smells edible? Maybe. You're not picky anymore. As you watch the smoke drift upward, your eyes catch on something strange in the distance. A stone monument half buried in sand. The top is carved in shapes that seem familiar, almost Egyptian, but with symbols you can't quite decode. You ask about it. The smith shrugs. Old gods, he says. Then he adds, Nubian ones. You're reminded that this is a land of crossroads, not just of trade, but of belief, language, and craft. Nubia didn't merely borrow from neighbours, it adapted, evolved, refined. Even their bronze had a distinct reddish hue, likely due to local ore. The sun begins to descend, casting long shadows across the village. You stretch out on your back, staring at the orange sky. You survived archery. You forged a blade. You hit yourself in the thumb. You're basically a hero. The sun dips lower now, casting golden light over the edge of the horizon, as if Nubia itself is exhaling after a long, sun-scorched day. You, however, aren't quite done being humbled. One of the elders waves you over and points toward the distance, toward the hills, where the silhouettes of small stone structures rise from the sand like jagged teeth. It's time to visit the royal tombs. You follow a small group up the dusty path, your legs aching with every step. The climb isn't steep, but the slope is loose underfoot, and the air, while cooling slightly, is still dry enough to chap your lips with every breath. You squint against the glare and stumble once or twice. A boy behind you mutters something that likely means, "Watch your step, outsider," but you appreciate the advice all the same, and then you see them, the pyramids. Smaller than the ones you've seen in Egypt, yes, but undeniably majestic. Tall, narrow, sharply angled structures carved with meticulous care. The stone glows a deep ochre in the evening light, like it's been soaked in sunset. These are the pyramids of Meroe, the royal cemetery of the Kingdom of Kush. This is no tourist postcard. It's memory etched in stone. You approach slowly. The air here feels different, quieter, sacred maybe. The group halts at the edge of the necropolis, allowing you to take it all in. You stand there, mouth slightly open, heart thudding in a strange mixture of exhaustion and awe. Each pyramid has a small adjoining chapel with carvings and reliefs. Some show rulers making offerings to gods, others display triumphant scenes, kings smiting enemies, queens holding sceptres, attendants bearing gifts. You trace your fingers along a sandstone carving of a lion-headed god. It's worn but powerful. A guide, barefoot, sun-wrinkled and carrying a staff, begins to speak. Through a translator, you learn that these tombs belong to the Kor and Kandake, the kings and queens of Kush. The Kandake in particular were formidable rulers, warrior queens, diplomats and sacred leaders. These women weren't royal spouses, they ruled. Period. You're told the royal dead were buried with goods for the afterlife, jewellery, weapons, vessels, even servants in some cases. Burial was not an end, but a passage, a continuation. The monuments were less about death than about eternal presence, rulers who still watched over their land from beneath the sand. Scholars remain divided on the precise rituals used here. Were they identical to Egyptian rites, or did they contain older indigenous customs lost to time? The evidence suggests both overlap and divergence, rites that mingled Nile traditions with deeper African cosmologies. You peer inside one of the chapels. It's narrow, dark, and surprisingly cool. On the walls are fading murals in ochre and charcoal, symbols that may have once been vibrant blues and reds. In the corner sits a battered offering table, its surface grooved by centuries of ritual use. You resist the urge to touch it. Some places aren't meant to be touched. Instead, you sit quietly on a low stone step, letting the weight of history settle over your shoulders. It's humbling, and then a bee lands on your nose. You don't scream, at least not loudly, but your flailing disrupts a small dust cloud, which settles nicely into your freshly oiled hair. The guide stares at you, unimpressed. The bee, meanwhile, departs with dignity. You regroup quickly and rejoin the others as they make their way around the necropolis. You notice that some of the pyramids are partially collapsed, the tips missing or leaning. Weathering, erosion, theft, even early archaeological mistakes, time has not been gentle. Yet despite their wounds, they stand tall. Your guide leads the group to a lookout point where the full spread of the site reveals itself. Rows of royal tombs, silhouettes cast against the endless dunes. In the far distance, thin trails of smoke drift from village fires. The desert glows, alive in its silence. As you sit there, listening to the wind roll over the stone, someone begins to hum, a low, mournful tune that echoes off the pyramid walls. It's not rehearsed. It just happens. A song for the dead, or maybe for the living who still carry them. You hum along quietly, off-key, but no one stops you. Before leaving, the guide points out a particular carving near one of the chapels, a script you've never seen. It's not Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's not Greek. It's Meroitic. Meroitic script, still largely undeciphered to this day, remains one of Nubia's enduring mysteries. Though scholars have identified an alphabet, the language behind the symbols is lost. It's as if the kingdom left behind a locked diary, the key buried somewhere beneath centuries of sand. You stare at the inscription, wondering what it says. A royal decree? A prayer? A joke? The silence doesn't answer. As the group begins the slow descent back to the village, you feel a strange ache. Not physical for once. Emotional. Like you've seen a window into something profound but can't quite grasp it. You glance back at the tombs one last time. They do not wave, they do not shimmer, they simply endure. And you follow the others down the hill, stumbling on a rock that was absolutely not there a minute ago. Of course you do. Back in the village, the mood feels different now. Calmer, more thoughtful. The shadows are stretching longer, and the air, while still warm, has lost its punishing edge. You sit beside a low fire pit, rubbing the sand from your eyes, when someone hands you a wooden tablet covered in a series of strange symbols. You blink at it. Then they hand you a reed stylus. Oh no, you've just been drafted into literacy. The tablet is smeared with a thin layer of dried clay. This is a writing surface, primitive but effective. Someone dips your stylus into a bit of charcoal ink and nods for you to copy the symbols already written. These aren't Egyptian hieroglyphs. They're from the Meroitic script, the unique writing system developed by the Kingdom of Kush. It consists of two versions, one for writing on papyrus or parchment, cursive, and a more angular form for stone inscriptions, hieroglyphic-looking, but entirely different from Egyptian glyphs. The symbols are fascinating, loops, half-circles, slashes, tiny bird-like forms. You try copying one. It comes out crooked and slightly offensive-looking. The elder watching you lets out a noise that might be a chuckle or a sigh of despair. You try again. Better. Still ugly. But at least it's vaguely the right shape. Meroitic remains largely unreadable to this day. Scholars have deciphered the sounds of the script, thanks to a bilingual inscription and years of painstaking comparison, but the language itself, still a mystery. We know what it sounded like, but not what it meant. Like having a song without lyrics. The tablet you're holding could say anything. A recipe, a tax report, a love poem, or the ancient equivalent of, if you're reading this, you're too close. You scratch out another character, and marvel at how confident the real scribes must have been. In Nubian society, literacy was a mark of status, often reserved for temple scribes, court officials, and sometimes royalty. You, however, have ink on your nose and a growing suspicion that your stylus is upside down. The woman beside you is working on something more advanced, copying a religious text onto a fragment of bark paper. She hums quietly as she writes, her symbols flowing gracefully from memory. You want to ask her what it says, but the moment feels too delicate to interrupt. Instead, you glance around at the tools of this modest scriptorium, carved bone inkwells, brushes made from hollow reeds, and a small box containing precious blue pigment, likely lapis lazuli crushed into dust. Used sparingly, of course. That stuff's worth more than your entire existence right now. You try to make a small sentence, or rather a row of characters that look like they could pass for a sentence if you squint and have never seen writing before. One of the elders leans over, squints at your tablet, and then grins. "Very strong," he says in your language, clearly lying. "Maybe war poem?" You smile weakly and pretend that was your intention all along. As the sky deepens into gold and purple, a small group gathers around a low platform near the centre of the village. This is not a religious ritual nor a political gathering. It's a storytelling circle, and to your surprise, writing plays no role at all here. A woman steps forward, staff in hand, and begins to speak. Her voice is strong, rhythmical. She doesn't read, she recites, a tale of an ancient queen who rode lions into battle, who commanded storms and defied invaders. The crowd is rapt. Children lean forward, elders nod solemnly, even the goats are quiet. Mostly. You realize something profound in that moment. While writing preserves knowledge, oral tradition gives it life. Nubians didn't just inscribe their stories in stone, they told them in firelight, passed them from breath to breath, woven like thread through generations. Writing was a tool, but memory was a fortress. Some experts argue that the Meroitic script wasn't used to record history in the traditional sense, but rather for administrative and ceremonial functions. The real soul of Nubia, its heroes, its gods, its humour, lived in voices, not ink. The literacy of the land ran deeper than any script. As the storyteller's tale reaches its climax, a battle under a blood moon, you notice the boy beside you mouthing the words along with her. He's heard this story 100 times, maybe 1,000. When she finishes, the crowd claps, not loudly, but with the sort of quiet reverence reserved for sacred things. The woman bows slightly and steps down. Another elder rises to speak, continuing the flow. You sit there, forgetting your aching legs, forgetting the ink stain on your tunic, forgetting even the goat that just headbutted your ankle, lightly. You're swept into a world where queens ride lions and pyramids echo with ancient laughter. Then someone taps your shoulder. It's the scribe again, handing back your clay tablet with a small, serious nod. "Tomorrow," he says. You take the tablet, still wet with crooked letters, and nod back. You've officially survived your first writing lesson, and barely avoided starting a linguistic disaster. As the firelight flickers against the walls, you gaze up at the stars beginning to blink into view. The sky in Nubia is enormous, unpolluted, and filled with the kind of stars that make you feel very small and very old at the same time. Somewhere, etched into a stone chapel or scrawled onto a faded bark scroll, your awkward beginner's glyphs will never be recorded. But tonight, you are part of a story, and that somehow is enough, until a mosquito lands directly inside your ear. Of course it does. You wake up with your cheek stuck to a woven mat and a vague taste of ash in your mouth. Someone nearby is already stoking the morning fire, sending up curls of smoke into the pre-dawn sky. And just when you're thinking today might finally be easier, maybe a little laundry, maybe some polite weaving, you're told you're going to the temple. Great. You rise slowly, bones clicking in protest, and follow your escort, an older boy with a serious expression and a temple sash tied across his shoulder. He doesn't speak much, but he gestures clearly. You're to help the priest today, which sounds dignified, until you remember that in ancient temples, help can include anything from sweeping sacred courtyards to handling the entrails of sacrificial birds. You trudge toward the temple complex at the edge of the village. It's smaller than the Egyptian temples you've seen in pictures, but no less impressive. The pillars are thick, carved with lions and winged sun discs, and the entrance bears the worn likeness of a pedamak, a lion-headed god unique to Nubia. Unlike the familiar Egyptian pantheon, the Kushites had their own divine lineup, shaped by both local beliefs and southern influences. As you enter the temple's cool shadows, a wave of incense smacks you in the face like a very fragrant pillow. Your eyes water. Your sinuses attempt a quick escape. You choke politely. Inside, the priesthood is already moving with choreographed precision. Robed figures sweep the floors, refill oil lamps, and place small offerings, bowls of beer, loaves of bread, bundles of herbs, before the altar. The head priest, tall and stern, gestures for you to assist with preparing the incense. You nod, trying not to inhale too deeply, as he hands you a small clay dish and a mixture of crushed resin, charcoal, dried myrrh, and, if your nose is correct, burnt citrus rind. You sprinkle it carefully into the brazier, and smoke rises instantly, curling into ethereal shapes as it climbs toward the stone ceiling. This is sacred smoke, used to cleanse, protect, and invite divine attention. Or at the very least, to keep the bugs out of the temple. The head priest leads you deeper into the sanctuary, where the air grows still and thick. He chants softly in a language you can't understand but feel in your bones. You kneel automatically, not from instruction, but instinct. Nubian religion, like its writing and warfare, was both independent and deeply interconnected. Deities like Amun and Isis appear frequently, often with regional twists, while others, like a pedamak, have no Egyptian counterpart. Scholars remain divided on whether the Kushite temples followed Egyptian ritual structures exactly, or developed their own layered theology. Likely the answer lies somewhere in the smoke. You're handed a bundle of dried papyrus strips and shown how to sweep the floor around the altar without stepping too close. You follow every instruction to the letter, more terrified of knocking something over than of any crocodile you've met so far. And just when you think you've survived the first hour without incident, a monkey enters. Yes, a monkey. It scampers through the entryway like it owns the place, hops onto a low pedestal, and steals an offering loaf with the practiced confidence of someone who's done this before. The head priest turns slowly. His expression doesn't change. You freeze. The monkey freezes. There's a silent moment of reckoning. Then the monkey screeches and bolts back out into the sunlight, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs and chaos. A junior priest sighs deeply, mutters what can only be a divine curse, and begins to chase it. You decide it's best not to ask questions. You return to your post and try very hard not to move. Later, the head priest beckons you toward a side chamber, much darker and more solemn. There's a stone basin in the centre, filled with water infused with lotus petals and what appears to be crushed lapis. This is ritual water, used for purification. You're instructed to dip your hands in and rub them together 3 times. You do. The scent is oddly calming, earthy, mineral-rich, with just a hint of something floral. Clean body, says the priest in halting words. Clean spirit. You nod. It's one of the few moments that doesn't require translation. The ritual continues with chants and gestures you don't understand, but you're allowed to observe. A small idol is placed on the altar, possibly of Isis, or maybe a local fertility goddess. Offerings are arranged around her, including that same fermented sorghum porridge you still haven't quite forgiven. You notice how little the priests speak aloud. Most of their rituals rely on gesture, repetition, and silence. This isn't a religion of spectacle, it's about presence, stillness, discipline. You try to mimic the posture of the novices, kneeling straight, hands flat, eyes lowered. It's harder than it looks. Your knees are screaming by minute 10. You shift slightly, trying to stretch one leg and knock over a clay bowl with your elbow. It rolls, spins, wobbles, and, miraculously, does not break. You snatch it up quickly and replace it with the practiced nonchalance of someone who didn't just nearly desecrate a holy altar. The head priest glances at you, then back to the idol, then lets it slide. You mouth a silent thank you to every god in the pantheon. By late morning, the ritual concludes. The idol is wrapped in cloth and returned to its resting place. The incense has burned low, the oil lamps gutter. The temple breathes again, quieter, emptier. You're handed a damp cloth and told to clean the entryway floor. No magic this time, just elbow grease. You mop slowly, methodically, letting your mind wander. You think about the people who came here centuries ago, with offerings and hopes and songs. You wonder if they sat where you sat, smelled the same incense, feared the same monkey. Then someone taps your shoulder and hands you a cup of water. The head priest. He nods. You work hard, he says. You bow. He raises one brow. Next time, no monkey. You nod solemnly. No monkey. As you step back into the light of day, blinking against the brightness, you realize you smell like smoke, sweat, and sanctity. And you've survived a Nubian temple. Barely. You make it exactly 15 steps out of the temple before your stomach announces its presence like a war horn. Loud, aggressive, and utterly unforgiving. The priest gives you a look that says, "We cleansed your soul, not your metabolism." Luckily, lunch is near. You're ushered toward a communal cooking area where a few villagers are gathered around simmering pots, sizzling stones, and baskets of what can only be described as mystery produce. Something smells good. Something else smells experimental. You sit on a log beside the fire, trying to will your legs to stop vibrating from all the kneeling. The woman next to you stirs a pot with a carved wooden spoon nearly as long as your arm. Steam wafts up, carrying the mingled scents of onion, wild garlic, coriander, and something smoky, maybe dried fish, or possibly goat. You're handed a flat dish made of fired clay and told to wait. You nod. You wait. You wait some more. It is perhaps the slowest cooking process you've ever witnessed, and your stomach is not impressed. You consider gnawing on a piece of firewood just as a child strolls by and drops a roasted cricket onto your plate with a proud grin. It stares up at you, all legs and crispy wings. You thank him, and because you're now operating entirely on cultural politeness and low blood sugar, you eat it. Surprisingly, not bad. Crunchy, nutty, slightly smoky. A nice change of pace from porridge. You glance at the child, who nods approvingly and hands you another. You take it without hesitation. Eventually the main dish is ready. Nubian stew. A thick, fragrant concoction of lentils, fish, onion, sorghum flour and wild greens. Served hot, thickened with ground acacia seed, and topped with a swirl of oil infused with garlic and chili. You scoop it up with a piece of kisra and take a bite. It's warm, deep, spiced in a way that makes your tongue curl and then settle. The heat isn't just from the fire, it's from the layers of thyme cooked into every bite. You've never tasted anything quite like it. While eating, you listen to the low conversation around the fire, mostly gossip. Some complaints about goats, a story about a neighbour who swears the river spirit stole her cooking spoon. Normal village chatter. Then someone coughs near the fire pit. You turn to see an older woman placing bundles of dried herbs into a small metal brazier. The smoke that rises is heavy, floral and sharply bitter. She waves the smoke toward you. It's not random, this is a cleansing ritual. You're about to get spiritually fumigated. She mutters a phrase as she waves the bundle in a slow circle near your head. You hold your breath, partly in reverence, partly to avoid coughing. The scent hits the back of your throat like herbal pepper spray. The villagers call it kesset aroma, a blend of lemongrass, frankincense, dried acacia pods, and sometimes crushed beetles. You try not to think about that part. It's used to ward off evil spirits, attract luck, and, more practically, repel flies. You're now fly-free and questionably blessed. The older woman pats your head with all the tenderness of a blacksmith tapping a horseshoe and moves on. After lunch, you're invited to help with preparing tomorrow's offerings. Not for the gods this time, for the ancestors. You're brought to a small altar outside someone's home. Nothing elaborate, just a flat stone, a bowl of river water, a bundle of dried millet, and 3 small clay figurines. The family gathers quietly. An older man places a piece of flatbread on the altar and whispers a few words into the wind. You learn this is a common practice in Nubia: domestic ancestor veneration. The spirits of the family's dead are believed to linger close, offering guidance, luck, sometimes even warnings. Honouring them isn't about fear, it's about relationship, about continuity. Scholars still debate whether these traditions grew out of older African tribal beliefs or were integrated into the structure of Kushite religion over time. Either way, it's a living link between the now and the before. You're given a small jar of scented water and told to pour it slowly across the stone. You do, watching it trickle between the grooves, soaking into centuries of ritual memory. A girl lights a bit of resin in a tiny clay cup. The smoke rises again, always with the smoke. Then someone brings out a drum, because no ritual in Nubia is truly complete without music. The drum is small, made of goat skin stretched over wood. Its voice is deep, soft, more heartbeat than instrument. The rhythm begins slow. A few people begin to clap. One or two sway gently. Then a man stands, begins to sing in a low, gravelly voice. It's not joyful exactly, nor sad. It's somewhere in between, a song of return, of presence. You don't know the words, but your chest tightens. It feels like something old is brushing your shoulder. Someone passes you a rattle made of seeds in a gourd. You shake it once, timidly. Then again, more confidently. You fall into the rhythm. It's not perfect, but it's honest. The drumming picks up speed. Children dance. A woman spins in place, her skirt flaring out like a blooming flower. The older man claps with surprising energy. The smoke dances too, curling through the air like it's trying to join the party. And then, just as it builds into something near ecstatic, it stops, not abruptly, just settles, like sand after a gust of wind. Silence returns, a silence filled with presence. The elder looks at you, places a piece of fruit in your hand and says, "They're listening." You nod. You believe it. As the ceremony ends, the sky is shifting into deeper blues. The day is winding down. Your belly is full, your ears still ringing faintly from the drum, your clothes now infused with herbs, spices, and a touch of what you hope wasn't crush beetle. You survived lunch. You were smoked like sacred meat. You made peace with the ancestors, and somehow you're still standing. Well, sitting, mostly. Your peaceful post-lunch haze is rudely interrupted by a loud, insistent call, sharp and rhythmic, echoing from the far edge of the village. A small group of men and women are gathering near a cluster of donkeys and oxen, all tethered near baskets and sacks. One of them points to you and then to a long shimmering path winding toward the hills. You're being sent to a gold mine. Wonderful. You try to smile. You fail. You're handed a head wrap, a rough cloth satchel, and a digging tool that looks like a cross between a chisel and a weapon. Someone offers you a handful of dates for the road and claps your back like you're heading into glorious battle. You're pretty sure you'll be lucky just to make it back with all your fingers. The journey to the mine takes you through rocky hills, sparse brush, and dry air so thin you can almost chew it. Your sandals kick up little clouds of dust with every step. Occasionally you pass others coming the opposite way. Men with bent backs, cracked lips, and faces powdered in gold dust. They nod at you. You nod back, wondering if this counts as solidarity or shared misery. Eventually you reach the site, a gash in the earth, flanked by piles of broken stone. A narrow trench leads downward into darkness, and nearby workers are hammering ore out of rock with bone-jarring rhythm. You're assigned to surface duty, crushing and sorting, which sounds nicer until you realise your job is to smash lumps of rock into powder, using a stone on a flat slab while the sun cooks your neck like a well-intentioned rotisserie. You begin. The first few strikes feel powerful, cathartic even. By the 10th, your wrist is screaming. By the 30th, you're wondering whether your bones are in fact turning into gold from sheer friction. And all around you, the others work in near silence. A few hum, one whistles, but most just swing, pound, scoop, sift. Nubia was famous for its gold. The Egyptians even referred to it as Tasseti, the land of the bow, and prized its golden wealth. Kushite kings used it for adornment, diplomacy, and religious offerings. Their mines were not just productive, they were legendary. But the labour behind that shine, gruelling. You sift your crushed stone through a woven sieve. Fine dust sifts out, catching the sun in a shimmer that would be beautiful if it weren't actively trying to lodge itself in your eyeballs. You wipe your brow. Your face now looks like it was kissed by a glittery sandstorm. One of the miners hands you a small chunk of the ore. Embedded in its grey belly is a thin, bright streak. Actual gold. Real. Valuable. He gestures for you to place it in the basket. You do, carefully, like it's sacred. Because in a way, it is. Gold wasn't just wealth in Nubia. It was power. Political, religious, and even cosmic. Some temples gilded their idols. Kings were buried with gold-covered ornaments. In some myths, it was the flesh of the gods themselves. Scholars still debate how much of Nubia's political dominance stemmed from its gold reserves versus its military strength. But when Egypt bent the knee to Kushite rulers, gold likely played no small part. You return to the crushing slab and continue your noble work of pulverizing the earth one tantrum swing at a time. A blister forms on your palm, you name it regret. You get 3 more. One of them definitely bursts. You keep going. At one point you're offered a drink from a communal water jar. It's warm, metallic, and tastes faintly like the inside of a copper pipe. You drink it gratefully. A boy nearby, maybe no older than 13, works faster than you and twice as neatly. He grins, tosses a stone up, catches it, and crushes it in 2 casual strikes. You try to imitate him and end up hitting your own thumb. Again. The sun dips lower. The air cools slightly. A small breeze dances across the hill. You almost weep with relief. The supervisor, a woman with shoulders like granite, calls for the baskets to be hauled back. You help load them onto a donkey who clearly despises you. You're handed a cloth to wipe your face. It comes back a strange shade of brown and gold. You trudge back to the village in a golden haze, literally. You're coated in the stuff. Your arms sparkle. Your neck glitters. You look like someone tried to gift wrap exhaustion. A man passing by raises an eyebrow. Rich now, he jokes. You smile weakly and say, "Wealthy in pain." He laughs. That counts. Back at the village, you're handed a bowl of lukewarm barley water and a slice of pickled radish. It tastes sour enough to reset your entire DNA, but you drink and chew anyway. Someone gestures for you to wash up near a large clay basin. You strip off your tunic, revealing a skin tone that now includes bronze shimmer and angry red sunburn. You scrub and scrub. The gold dust doesn't want to leave. It clings like the day's memory. You dry off with a piece of woven linen that's seen better days and wrap yourself in a fresh tunic. The evening breeze brushes against your skin, cool and welcome. You're tired. Not just Mr. Nap tired, but my organs might go on strike tired. But also, somehow, you're proud. You helped touch the currency of kings, even if it touched back, with blisters. You walk toward the firelight, where dinner is being prepared, your arms glowing faintly in the dusk. A girl nearby squints and says something to a friend. You don't catch it, but you're pretty sure it translates to, "Why is that one sparkling?" Of course you are. You're just beginning to recover from your gold-dusted near-death experience when the village elder waves you over with a look that is equal parts invitation and warning. You assume you're being summoned for another chore, maybe something simple like grinding flour or accidentally setting something on fire while helping with dinner, but no, you're going to help with the elephants. You laugh. No one else does. Apparently it's not a joke. You follow the elder toward the outer grazing grounds beyond the village perimeter, where the brush gets thicker and the paths narrower. The sun is lower now. Long shadows stretch across the dusty hills, and the air is thick with the scent of dried grass, sweat, and dung. Not metaphorical dung. Abundant, actual dung. In the distance, you hear them before you see them. Deep, rumbling calls like thunder wrapped in gravel. Then they appear. Massive, slow-moving towers of muscle and memory. A small herd of Nubian elephants, dusty grey and regal, clustered near a watering trough made of packed mud and stone. You freeze. One of them lifts its trunk and snorts loudly, sending a cloud of dust into the air. You're now fully awake. Elephants held an unusual place in ancient Nubian life. While they weren't domesticated in the modern sense, some sources suggest they were semi-managed, used symbolically in royal rituals, displayed as power symbols, and possibly even deployed in war. There are records of elephant troops in African and even Indian warfare, but whether the Kushites used them directly in battle is still a topic of scholarly debate. What's clear, though, is that Nubians respected these creatures, revered them even, not pets, not livestock, more like very large sacred roommates who occasionally trample things. You're handed a stick. You ask what it's for. The man shrugs. Encouragement. Excellent. Your first task is walking encouragement. You're to accompany the handlers as they gently guide the elephants toward a new grazing patch. This involves standing just close enough to be helpful and just far enough not to be stepped on. You walk beside a young bull who seems more interested in scratching his flank on a tree than following any direction. You tap your stick lightly on the ground. He ignores you. You try a firm voice. He sneezes in your direction. It is, without question, the most forceful nose blast you've ever experienced, and now you're covered in elephant mist. Of course you are. You trudge on, following the herd as it moves lazily through the brush. The handlers speak in clicks, claps, and low tones. No shouting, no whips, just an ancient language of mutual respect and warnings. You try to mimic it. The elephant looks at you with the bemused patience of someone watching a squirrel try to operate a bicycle. After a long, slow walk, the herd reaches a patch of soft scrub. The elephants begin to feed, plucking shrubs and branches with their trunks, curling them into their mouths with astonishing grace. It's mesmerizing, until one of them casually drops a pile of dung the size of your torso right in front of you. You step backward too fast, trip over a root, and land squarely in a pile of something that wasn't there 5 seconds ago. You lay there for a moment, staring at the clouds, accepting your fate. A handler helps you up, brushing off your shoulder with a kindness that says, "This happens more than you think." You smile weakly. Later, you're tasked with refilling the trough. You carry buckets of water from a nearby stream and pour them carefully. It takes 10 trips. By the end, your arms are noodles, your sandals are wet, and your legs are mud-streaked. One of the elephants slurps noisily and immediately dunks its trunk into the water, then sprays itself, and you, for fun. You stand there, dripping, your dignity eroding like sandstone in a flood. And then something shifts. You find yourself laughing, really laughing. Not because it's funny, though it is, but because at this point, what else can you do? You've survived gold mines, crocodiles, writing lessons, and sacred monkeys. A little elephant bath feels almost welcome. You sit on a nearby rock as the herd continues to feed. The handlers relax too, some of them whittling wood, others sharing roasted nuts. A girl plays a soft tune on a reed flute. The sound mingles with the low grumbles of the elephants, the rustle of trees and the occasional snort. One handler offers you a piece of dried fig wrapped in a leaf. You chew slowly, savouring the sweetness. You ask him, in your clumsy broken version of the language, why they work with elephants at all. He points to his heart, then the sky, then the elephant. You don't need a translator. Respect, reverence, connection. In some Kushite iconography, elephants appear beside kings and gods. Some scholars believe they symbolize strength and divinity. Others suggest they were guardians of sacred ground. Either way, you're beginning to understand why. These creatures are more than just animals. They are stories, memory with tusks. As the sun begins to sink below the horizon, casting everything in soft red and amber, the herd slowly starts its journey back. You walk with them, just behind the biggest one, who now tolerates your presence as one might tolerate a particularly earnest house cat. Back at the village, the handlers give the elephants dried palm fronds and a rub-down with coarse cloth. You offer to help. The elephant you approach flaps his ears, leans into the rub, and lets out a sound that might be approval, or indigestion. Hard to tell. By the time the elephants are tethered for the night, the stars are beginning to pop overhead. You smell like hay, sweat, and dignity regained. Almost. You return to your mat, tired beyond words. You survived elephant duty, and somehow you'd do it again. But maybe not tomorrow. Your limbs ache in places you didn't even know existed. You sleep like a slab of sandstone, unmoving, unconscious, and absolutely done with the day. But Nubia, ever generous, offers no such thing as a break day. Not when diplomacy calls. Today, you're joining a Nubian envoy to Egypt. You're not sure how this happened. Maybe someone mistook your dazed expression for composure. Maybe it's because you're still faintly glittering from the gold mine, and they assumed you were someone important. Whatever the reason, you now find yourself standing at the village edge, squinting into the early light as a caravan prepares to move. There are 5 of you in total. An elder acting as envoy leader, 2 young guards with sharp spears and sharper jawlines, a scribe with a case of documents, and you, the tag-along foreigner who may or may not be luggage. You're handed a wrapped bundle containing dried figs, water and flatbread. The journey ahead leads northward along the Nile, and while you won't go all the way to Thebes, you'll be reaching a border settlement where trade and diplomacy intertwine. Your ride? A donkey, of course, not a majestic steed, not a royal chariot. A donkey named, judging by the handler's chuckle, something like Stubborn Cloud. You mount with all the grace of a newborn gazelle and immediately learn that Nubian donkeys walk with a special kind of sideways swagger that jolts your spine with every step. By mile 3, you feel like your skeleton has filed for divorce. As the sun climbs, the landscape rolls by. Desert brush, rocky ridges, occasional glimpses of the Nile glinting between date palms. You pass clusters of traders moving south, some carrying dyed cloth, others leading goats or hauling baskets of pottery. Many nod politely as you pass. A few squint at you, clearly wondering what happened to your face. You wave anyway. The elder speaks occasionally, offering pointers on etiquette. Do not speak unless asked. Always face the official directly. Do not pick your nose in front of the gatekeeper god statue. Solid advice. As you travel, you begin to hear more Egyptian spoken. The transition is slow. First a phrase, then a full conversation. The scribe beside you switches effortlessly between languages, and you feel your brain melting under the pressure of trying to follow along. When the settlement finally comes into view, you're relieved, until you realise this means it's time to act like you know what you're doing. The border post is a small fortress, mud brick walls, wooden gate, flags fluttering with both Nubian and Egyptian symbols. Soldiers watch from the towers, their posture casual but alert. You are led through a courtyard where baskets of goods are inspected, documents are read aloud, and occasionally bribes are exchanged in the form of gifts. Inside a shaded chamber, your group is brought before the local Egyptian governor, a man with painted eyes, a long ceremonial kilt, and the expression of someone who has heard every excuse in the world. Twice. The elder bows, the guards bow, the scribe bows. You bow last, a second too late, and a little too low. Your forehead kisses the floor. The governor raises one eyebrow. Great start. The elder begins to speak. The scribe translates with practiced ease. They're negotiating trade terms, access to a copper shipment, permission for a caravan to pass in 2 days' time, and something about grain surplus records. You don't understand most of it, but you nod anyway, hoping you're not accidentally agreeing to sell your kidneys. Then the governor turns to you and says something. Everyone looks at you. You blink. The scribe whispers. He asks where you are from. You straighten up. A far-off land, you say. The governor squints. How far? You panic. 2 moons. That way, you gesture vaguely west. There is a pause. Then, mercifully, he laughs. Not a huge laugh, but enough to break the tension. He waves you off. Foreigners, he mutters, always lost. You nod as solemnly as you can while sweating through your new linen tunic. After the formalities, you're offered a drink. Fermented date wine, strong and thick. You take a sip. It tastes like a punch to the throat followed by a hug. You try not to choke. Trade is agreed. Stamps are pressed into wet clay. Scrolls are exchanged. The guards relax slightly. The scribe packs up the documents. You, meanwhile, try to discreetly sit down before your knees give out entirely. As you rest, you overhear a few Egyptian officials discussing Nubia, its gold, its warriors, its temples. There's a tone of admiration, but also curiosity. You catch one phrase repeated often. Strong land. Strong indeed. On the return trip, the elder seems pleased. He even offers you a piece of candied tamarind from his pouch, a small but significant reward. You chew slowly, savouring the tangy sweetness and the quiet pride humming in your chest. Nubia didn't rise to power by accident. It negotiated, it traded, it spoke multiple languages, and it walked into foreign courts with gold on its arms and confidence in its voice. And today, somehow, you were part of that. Of course, that feeling lasts until your donkey steps in something unmentionable and flings it onto your leg. Diplomatic prestige, gone. You arrive back in the village just after dusk, tired but not broken. The stars overhead shimmer like tiny beads scattered across dark cloth. The air smells of smoke and cooking lentils. You survived a Nubian diplomatic mission. You impressed no one, and yet, somehow, you still got the candied tamarind. You call that a win. Night has finally arrived, but it's not the kind of gentle evening you'd hope for after a diplomatic adventure and being used as a donkey trampoline. No, the Nubian night is another beast entirely, one that slips its arms around you with a chill and a whisper. You step outside your sleeping area, expecting mild relief from the day's heat. Instead, a cold wind smacks you in the face with the enthusiasm of a vengeful ghost. It's the kind of sudden high desert chill that makes your skin question all previous life choices. Earlier you were sweating through layers of linen. Now you're huddling into yourself, clutching your thin outer shawl and watching your own breath fog in the moonlight. Welcome to a desert night in Nubia, where temperature logic goes to die. You shuffle to the fire pit in the village centre, where a few people are already gathered around glowing coals. They sit wrapped in blankets and heavy cloaks, some sipping hot drinks, others silently poking the embers like they're negotiating with them. Someone hands you a cup. It's warm and earthy, a brew made from roasted barley and herbs. You take a sip. It tastes like liquid toast, with just a hint of licorice. You immediately want more. The stars above are unreal. With no electric light to ruin them, the sky opens like a tapestry. You can trace the entire river of the Milky Way, framed by sharp silhouettes of thorny trees and mud brick huts. A meteor streaks overhead, and a child gasps. You gasp too, but mostly because your knees are locking from crouching too long on a cold stone. The night sounds different here. No buzzing air conditioners, no car horns, just the low whoosh of wind over sand and the occasional bray of a distant donkey, who is clearly having a personal crisis. There are also frogs, chirping from a muddy patch near the river's edge, and night birds that hoot like slightly judgmental librarians. You wrap your shawl tighter and listen as someone begins to sing softly. It's not a grand ballad or even a proper melody, just a low repetitive chant. A lullaby? A prayer? Hard to say. But the sound is gentle, made for this hour. Then someone starts talking about jackals. You freeze. Apparently, this is the time of night when jackals, slim, clever predators, slip closer to the village edge. They're mostly harmless, the elders say. Mostly. Keep your food wrapped. Keep your fingers to yourself. Don't pet shadows. Good advice. One of the men nearby tells a story of a jackal who could mimic human voices and trick people into wandering into the hills. He sings like your brother, he says, and when you follow him, he laughs. You politely pretend this is not the most horrifying thing you've ever heard. Then, because this is your life now, you're handed a watch duty assignment. Of course you are. Apparently every night a few villagers stay up in rotating shifts to make sure fires stay lit, animals don't wander off, and, yes, jackals don't sing people into oblivion. Tonight you're on the late shift. You join two others on the outer edge of the village near the goat pen. They nod in acknowledgement, then go back to sipping their hot drinks and occasionally muttering about the cold. You're given a small torch and a stick, though it's not clear if the stick is for defence or emotional support. Time passes slowly on watch. You pace a bit to stay warm, watching the moon climb. You spot movement at the edge of your vision several times. A flutter of a bird, the twitch of grass, a small rustle near the pottery piles. You investigate once and startle a frog the size of your fist. It stares at you like you're the nuisance. Eventually your companions begin to chat. One mentions that sometimes, out here in the cold, they feel closer to their ancestors. This is when they whisper, he says. You ask what they say, he shrugs. Depends on how well you've behaved. You laugh, then immediately wonder if that was the wrong thing to do. The conversation drifts. They talk about family, about how the stars are the eyes of old kings. One man swears he saw his grandmother in a dream, telling him not to plant lentils near the west wall. Another says the best ideas come during cold night fire shifts. You nod, pretending you aren't wondering whether any of your ancestors are watching you trying not to shiver into pieces. Eventually your body adjusts, a little. You still feel like a wrapped lizard, but the torch helps, and the shared silence becomes companionable. You're not just surviving it, you're part of it. Around this time, a small group of nomads passes quietly near the village edge. They don't enter, just wave from a respectful distance. One of your companions waves back and offers them a slice of dried bread, which they accept with a silent nod. Nomadic groups like these were common in Nubia. Traders, herders, and desert wanderers who moved between settlements, following water, stars, and ancient routes. They carried stories with them, maps etched into memory, sometimes bringing goods, sometimes bringing warnings. Their presence is never questioned, only acknowledged. As they disappear into the night, your shift comes to an end. You hand off your torch to the next group, stretch your frozen limbs, and make your way back through the quiet village. You pass a house where someone's burning incense. You pass a goat softly snoring. You pass the spot where you once stepped in elephant dung. Memories. You reach your mat, collapse into the woven fibres, and wrap yourself tight in a blanket that smells like herbs and ash. The cold still bites at your nose and toes, but your body, exhausted and finally allowed to rest, doesn't care. You've made it through another Nubian experience. You've watched stars blink, heard stories breathe, guarded goats, ducked jackals, and you're still here, mostly intact. You wake up with something crawling on your foot. You freeze. You try very, very hard to believe it's just a loose thread or a leaf. But when you finally gather the courage to flick it away, you feel the unmistakable tickle of multiple tiny legs. You leap up, flailing like a startled chicken, and knock over a sleeping goat in the process. The goat glares at you, unimpressed. You mutter an apology, and then you see it. A scorpion, maybe the size of your thumb, now scuttling under a nearby mat like it pays rent there. Welcome to Night Shift Survival Desert Edition. The others barely react. One of the elders wanders over, lifts the mat, captures the scorpion with a broken pottery shard, and flicks it calmly into a pit of coals. Sizzle. Done. He doesn't even blink. You, meanwhile, are re-evaluating your entire relationship with the concept of sleeping on the ground. Turns out you've drawn another short straw today. Scorpion watch duty. Yes, that's a thing. No, you don't get to opt out. As the morning sun peeks over the horizon, you're handed a long stick with a flattened tip and assigned to perimeter patrol. Your job? Tap and prod around rocks, logs and corners of storage huts to check for unwanted eight-legged squatters. You're also given a pouch of dried herbs tied with twine. Apparently the smell deters some of them. You tie it to your belt and begin poking at the base of a granary with exaggerated caution. The first few inspections go fine. Dust, rocks, an unimpressed beetle. Then you lift a cracked jar and find a centipede long enough to require its own address. You slam the jar back down, walk 3 steps away, and whisper firmly to yourself, "Nope." Scorpions in Nubia were more than just nuisances. They were symbols in local lore. Feared? Yes, but also respected. The goddess Serket, borrowed from Egyptian tradition, was often depicted as a scorpion, protector against venom and stings. Some talismans were shaped like them, worn for both warning and warding. Scholars remain divided on how much medical knowledge the Nubians had regarding venom treatment. Some suggest they used crushed herbs, clay poultices, or even specific chants to ease symptoms. Others believe they simply built up a cultural tolerance for pain. You hope it's the first. By mid-morning, the heat returns. You take a brief break near a small date palm where someone's left a bundle of wrapped bread and an onion. You nibble, chew. Try not to think about how many things with stingers might be watching you from nearby shrubs. Just then, one of the younger kids runs up to you, waving something excitedly. It's a woven cage of palm strips, inside of which sits a live scorpion. You do not scream, but your soul definitely tries to climb out through your ears. The boy grins and lifts the cage toward your face. You backpedal with all the elegance of a panicked camel. The boy laughs. Apparently they sometimes collect small scorpions as a test of bravery or just for fun. You fail both categories. To make amends, you're invited to join a group preparing anti-scorpion charms, small bundles of dried reed, wrapped with dyed thread and filled with pungent herbs. They're burned in corners of homes or tucked into bedding. You spend the next hour tying knots with trembling fingers and trying not to jump at every rustle. The women leading the charm making explain that scorpions represent more than just danger. They're reminders of caution, of boundaries. They don't attack, one woman says. They warn. You nod, wiping sweat from your forehead with the hem of your tunic. And then they sting, you add. She shrugs. So do people. Fair point. After the charm making, you return to patrolling. At one corner near the goat pen, you spot a dark shape beneath a broken basket. You steel yourself, lift the basket, and, relief, just a rock. Then something on the rock moves. You let out a sound that can only be described as a cross between a gasp and an accordion. A handler nearby walks over and gently shoos the little creature with a twig. Not dangerous, he says. Small. Small, yes, but still 8 legs and armoured. You sit in the shade after your round is finished, arms sore from crouching, eyes strained from scanning every shadow like you're a contestant in an insect-themed horror film. A girl hands you a drink made from fermented tamarind. It's sour, cold, and instantly calming. She sits beside you, pointing at the hills. They come from there, she says. Scorpions, the caves. They move when it cools. You ask how the villagers deal with them. Watch, she says, and listen. As if on cue, a small bell rings from the far side of the village. Another scorpion spotted, this one near the grain store. A handler steps in, sweeps it into a jar and seals it. Later it will be released far from the settlement. Some believe killing them brings misfortune. This time, you watch closely. You take mental notes. You are, slowly, becoming one of the watchers, and despite the goosebumps on your neck, you feel responsible. The day wears on, the heat intensifies, and the scorpions retreat again into the cool spaces beneath stone and shade. You're finally relieved from duty, your stick returned, your belt herb pouch nearly empty. As you walk toward the communal fire, someone hands you a new amulet. Woven reeds, shaped like a scorpion, tied with black thread. For courage, they say. You accept it. Not because you feel brave, but because you want to be. You survive scorpion duty, barely. And just as you sit down to rest, something tickles your ankle. You leap 3 feet in the air. It's a string of your own sandal. Of course it is. By now you've survived crocodile-lurking river baths, sand-scorched gold mines, monkey-dodging temples, and a surprise stint as an unwilling scorpion whisperer. So when someone invites you to join the villagers for a night of fireside gossip, you're relieved. No physical labour, no venomous arthropods, no hauling things up or out of a hole. You're in. The sun is dropping behind the hills, painting the sky in streaks of indigo and orange. The village fire crackles in the centre, a low glowing heart surrounded by straw mats and tired bodies. Some people are eating, others are plucking at string instruments or humming idly. You ease yourself onto a mat, trying to sit like someone who hasn't recently fallen into multiple animal-related situations. You're handed a roasted tuber wrapped in leaves and a gourd of something warm and tangy. It smells like hibiscus, ginger, and faint judgment. Perfect. The fire circle is, you quickly learn, the social engine of the village. This is where stories are told, alliances whispered, and reputations either elevated or eviscerated with a few casual remarks. It's politics, theatre, and stand-up comedy rolled into one. Tonight's theme, you. Apparently. One of the elders begins to recount your week with such dramatic flair, you wonder if he moonlights as a bard. He pantomimes your failed archery attempt with wild gestures and recreates your scorpion panic with a surprisingly accurate yelp. The crowd roars with laughter. Even the goats seem vaguely amused. You can't even be mad. It's brilliant. To redeem yourself slightly, you offer a story from your own land. It doesn't translate perfectly, and your attempt to describe what a shopping mall is leads to confusion and a heated 5-minute sidebar about whether such a place could even be structurally sound. You let it go. Then, as the jokes settle, someone asks you where you're really from. You answer, but they shake their heads. No, a woman says, pointing at your chest. Where is your centre? Your place? It's a question that doesn't quite exist in your language. They're not asking about a city. They're asking about identity, about where your breath goes when you close your eyes. You hesitate. Think, shrug. Still looking, you say. She nods, satisfied. Conversation drifts. Someone brings out a carved board and small stones, an ancient strategy game not unlike Senet or Mancala. You're invited to play. The rules are simple. The strategy? Not so much. You lose 3 rounds. Your opponent, a girl half your age, never breaks eye contact and smiles like a smug oracle. Then comes the storytelling. A man with a raspy voice and a long staff stands and clears his throat. Silence falls instantly. Even the fire seems to lean in. He begins. A tale of a boy who chased the wind, who climbed the mountain to steal the shadow of the moon. His words are slow, rhythmic. No shouting, just gravity. The story unfurls like smoke. Mythic, strange, and oddly familiar. You recognize some of the motifs. The quest, the challenge, the trickster. But the symbols are unique. Nubian landscapes, Nubian spirits, a lion who speaks in riddles, a river that refuses to flow backward, a curse that can only be lifted by laughter. And just when you think the boy will fail, he does something unexpected. He sits down and listens. That's it. He listens. And in doing so, the world changes. The story ends. The fire crackles. You sit in silence for a long moment. Then someone claps. Then another. and suddenly the night is filled with soft applause and thoughtful nods. You turn to your left and realise a woman has been weaving during the story. She holds up her work, a small square of cloth with black and gold threading. She points to the corner where a tiny scorpion symbol is stitched. "For you," she says, and smiles. You take it carefully. It's warm from her hands, soft from wear, and more meaningful than any souvenir you've ever bought. A younger man joins the fire circle, and you try to blend in. But it doesn't take long before things turn. He's bold, loud, eager to impress, and unfortunately he asks you a question you cannot possibly answer. "Tell us," he says, "how do people in your land honour their dead?" You blink. You try to explain. Cemeteries, ashes, flowers, eulogies. You say the word funeral, and the group frowns. It doesn't translate cleanly, not emotionally anyway. One of the elders sighs. "You put them in boxes?" he asks. You nod slowly. He shakes his head. "We speak to them." There's silence again, but not heavy. More like a collective remembering. Someone begins to hum, a deep, slow tone joined by others in layers. A woman sprinkles herbs into the fire and the smoke turns sweet and dense. The circle becomes still. You don't ask questions this time. You just listen. Later, as the group disperses, you remain at the fire. The man who asked the question returns, sits beside you, and nudges your shoulder. "I was rude," he says. "I wanted to see if you would stumble." You nod. "I did." He grins. "Yes, but you stayed." You both stare into the fire for a while. Then, with perfect timing, a goat attempts to eat your woven cloth gift. You shoo it away, clutch your prize to your chest, and wonder if this is how all ancient Nubian evenings ended, with laughter, smoke, and an ongoing battle for personal belongings against opportunistic livestock. You survived your first full evening of fireside gossip, storytelling, and casual spiritual philosophy, and all it cost you was your pride. Again, by morning, the skies have turned a strange metallic yellow. The sun rises behind a veil of haze, and the wind that greets you isn't gentle. It's sharp, gritty, and oddly warm. You step outside and immediately taste the air. It's dry and bitter, laced with the fine sting of dust. Something's coming. You see it in the way the villagers move. Faster, more focused, without conversation. Pots are pulled inside. Mats are rolled up. Animals are herded into tighter enclosures. Someone tethers a roof thatch with extra rope. You squint toward the horizon. That's when you see it. A wall of dust crawling across the land like a rolling cliff, churning and alive. A haboob, a full-blown desert dust storm, and it's heading straight for you. You've heard of these before, maybe even seen a dramatic documentary clip, but this isn't a clip. This is your actual life now. Someone tosses you a head wrap and a pair of goggles made from slitted leather. You don't ask questions. You wrap your head, cover your mouth, and tighten every knot like the wind itself is watching. The wind hits before the dust does, strong enough to sway you sideways. Sand begins to sting your arms, finding every exposed spot like it's personally offended by your skin. You're pulled into a storage hut just as the first gust of dust barrels through the village. It roars like a sea of whispers, all angry. Everything goes brown, then orange, then a strange grey that feels like the inside of a closed eye. Inside the hut it's dim and crowded. A dozen others are huddled with you, elders, children, one goat that seems to have snuck in. You crouch near a wall, heart thudding. Outside, the wind screams against the structure, making it groan and shudder. Fine powder seeps through every gap in the door, coating your legs, your hands, your lips. Breathe slow, someone tells you, like sleeping. You try. You fail. Then you try again. Haboobs aren't just weather. They're events, forces, history books trapped in motion. For desert cultures like the Nubians, these storms were both threat and teacher. They cleared the land, erased paths, shifted dunes, and forced stillness. You didn't fight them, you endured them. Scholars remain divided on how ancient Nubians prepared for these storms in the most extreme cases. Some believe granaries were double-walled for this very reason. Others argue that entire settlements were structured to face away from prevailing winds, built with airflow corridors that could redirect and absorb pressure. Judging by the fact that this hut is still standing, you're starting to believe it. The hours pass slowly. Someone shares dried dates and a bit of salted fish. A child in the corner hums quietly. The goat farts. No one reacts. There's something oddly bonding about being trapped in a dust cocoon with strangers and livestock. Eventually the storm begins to lose strength. You can feel it more than hear it. The pressure fading, the air shifting like a massive exhale. The light at the door shifts again, now tinged with the palest yellow. The wind is no longer howling, just muttering. The door creaks open, and everything is different. The village looks like it's been baked into a crust. Everything is coated in a thick film of dust, fine, pinkish beige, soft as flour. The trees look fuzzy, the huts are camouflaged. Even the river has lost its shimmer. You step outside. Your footprints disappear the moment you make them. The sun reappears, soft and filtered through the haze. No birds, no voices, just the crunch of your sandals and the distant bleat of a goat. A woman walks past you carrying a broom made of stiff reeds. She hands you a smaller one. You are now part of the post-storm cleanup crew. You sweep. You sweep like your ancestors depended on it. Dust off doorways, rooftops, baskets, mats. At one point you uncover a child's toy, a carved lion figurine that's been half buried. You wipe it clean and hand it to a boy, who nods solemnly before running off with it like you've just gifted him a kingdom. Later, at the river's edge, you help refill water jars. The Nile looks unchanged, but it carries flecks of dust that sparkle like mica in the sun. You splash your face, and it turns to paste. Villagers gather for a quiet meal of millet and lentils served cool and soft, with slices of dried mango and a few slivers of preserved fish. You eat in silence, the exhaustion from the storm sitting heavy in your shoulders. Not from fear, but from awe. You didn't just witness nature, you survived it. You sit by a low wall with your bowl in your lap, watching the dust settle onto the horizon like a curtain closing. The world feels new, or at least rearranged. Someone sits beside you. It's the boy from earlier, the one with the lion toy. He holds it up to the fading sun, turns it in his hands, and then asks, "Did you think the wind would take you?" You smile. "Almost," he nods. "Sometimes it does. But not today." And then, as if the universe is physically incapable of letting you have one profound moment without interference, a rooster climbs onto the wall and poops directly into your half-empty bowl. Of course it does. The boy laughs. The villagers nearby laugh. You just sigh and toss what's left to the goats. You survived the storm, you swept half the village, and you gained the respect of one small child and one deeply disrespectful rooster. Progress. Your final morning in ancient Nubia arrives not with ceremony or drums, but with the soft creak of a reed mat and the distant clatter of a cooking pot being stirred. You sit up slowly, every joint creaking like a door hinge in need of oil. Somehow, you're still alive. You've lasted through crocodile-infested rivers, gold mines, scorpion patrol, elephant duty, diplomatic blunders, and a sandstorm that tried to erase the entire map. And now you are leaving. But not before one last walk. You're handed a small satchel with food for the road. Flatbread, a few dried dates, and something sticky wrapped in leaves. Probably fermented, hopefully edible. The villagers gather at the edge of the settlement to see you off. No big speeches, no long goodbyes, just nods, small smiles. One woman presses a folded cloth into your hands, a shawl, worn soft from use, embroidered with a pattern you don't recognise. You wear it anyway. The sun has just risen, and the land around you is hushed in a golden glow. You step onto the path that leads along the Nile, your feet crunching over pebbles and ancient memories. The river shimmers beside you, calm and wide, its waters moving with the certainty of centuries. And though this is your exit, the walk is slow, purposeful. Your eyes linger on every detail now. You pass the stone granaries where children once dared you to race them around the walls. The goat pen where you almost lost your lunch to a four-legged thief, the temple courtyard where incense once stung your eyes, and the head priest gave you that look. You remember it all. The landscape is no longer foreign. It's still harsh, yes, but not hostile. You know which trees will scratch you, which trails lead to water, which rocks definitely hide bugs. You've learned when to speak and when to stay quiet, when to kneel, when to laugh, when to duck. There's a breeze coming off the river now, gentle and cool. It rustles the papyrus and sets the tall grasses whispering. You swear you hear a voice in it. Low, dry, amused. "Still here," it says. Barely. As you walk, you recall a conversation you had 2 nights ago by the fire. Someone asked you what you'd bring home from all this. You gave the usual answer. Memories, stories, sand in places sand should not be. They nodded, but said nothing. But now, you know what you'll really take with you. The rhythm. Not just the rhythm of the days, the grind, the work, the dust, but the rhythm of belonging, of breath matching breath around the fire, of laughter even after failure, of hands moving together, whether grinding grain, tying knots, or building homes that lean into the wind. You reach the top of a small hill and turn back one last time. The village sits below, quiet in the early light. Smoke rises gently from a few hearths. Somewhere a woman begins to sing. Not loudly, just enough to carry. It's the same melody from your second day, the one that got stuck in your head and refused to leave. You smile, and then you turn and walk on. The road ahead isn't easier, but it feels lighter, like you're not carrying this journey alone anymore. Maybe it's the rhythm, maybe it's the dust, or maybe it's the lingering glow of your gold mine sunburn. Let yourself rest now. The sun has set over the kingdom of Kush, and the dust has finally settled. The fires are dimmed, the drums are silent, and even the goats have stopped plotting. The Nile flows quietly in the distance, its waters cradling the memory of another long day. Your feet are sore, your hands are calloused, and somewhere beneath your eyelids are dreams wrapped in linen and starlight. The kind of dreams made not of noise but of rhythm, of morning smoke and evening wind, of footsteps in the sand, of laughter by firelight. You've walked among kings and potters, children and warriors. You've carried water and gold, swept away storms, and learned when to bow and when to stand. You've spoken to ancestors, stumbled through prayers, and watched the stars blink through scorpion watch nights. You were tired, and you kept going. So now let the weight of that journey slip away. Let your muscles loosen. Let your chest rise and fall with the slow rhythm of river reeds swaying in the dusk. You are safe here. The storm has passed. The animals are tethered. The world will keep spinning. You've earned your rest. You've earned the silence. And if tomorrow you wake up with sand still clinging to your elbows and the memory of elephant breath in your hair, so be it. It means you were really there. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.